Hello everyone, I am Patrick and I will be spending the next few minutes looking at this amazing website that Lynn Fisher has created. It's her own personal portfolio and she's recently redesigned it. Um, and my goal here is to show you a little bit of the Firefox DevTools here on this site. So I'm running Firefox nightly here, but this would work just as well in the Firefox release because the things that I'm going to show are actually on the release browser as well. So my goal here is to try and understand how this was made with the use of CSS and HTML. So I've not looked at it yet, and we'll do that together, and we'll just go and do some kind of investigation work to see how this works. So let me just toggle the tools. All right. So obviously everything is like sort of rotated here. So there's probably a transform right here, as you can see, 30 degrees. It's also scaled a little bit to make it bigger. So that's one thing that's obvious here. And I can see grid template rows here immediately, which, all right, so that element, actually the body element, is already a display grid, which is something you might have heard of, especially recently because there's been a lot of talks, a lot of documentation being written about this new layout system, and we happen to have in Firefox a whole new grid tool here, the grid inspector, which lists all of the grids present on a page. There's only one here, and if you click that button, it will highlight the rows and columns. So the grid layout system is one where CSS allows you to define a set of columns and rows in many different ways, and then you can position elements onto that grid very easily. So just being able to see the grid just with that tool is amazingly useful. So we can see that there's a grid that's used here. Let's see, there are several columns and rows. One thing that's useful here, we can click that checkbox to show the line numbers. Obviously the grid is a little bit bigger than my viewport here, so I can't see everything, but that's fine. Let's continue investigating. One thing we can do is we can maybe turn off the transforms so we can see things a little bit more easily. So there's a few things that happen here. What I realize is when I change the window size, then the whole content of the site changes as well, which is useful. It's if you have a smaller browser window, you're still going to be able to see everything. So let's see how that was done. So I'm still on the body element here. Okay, height 100 VH. That plays an important role here. So the VH unit stands for view height, which means that the height of the body element is always 100% of the viewport, the current viewport. So if I make the viewport smaller, but it's still going to be exactly the size of the viewport. So that's a very interesting unit here. And then if we look at the grid, which we just highlighted before, we see that we have, let's see, grid template columns, repeat 10, 1FR. So if you don't know the FR unit, that's a new unit introduced with the grid layout, which means fraction. So basically what that means is that there's going to be 10 columns that each take one fraction of the available width. So they'll be exactly the same size. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 columns, and they're exactly the same size. There's also a column gap of 15 pixels. This is these areas in between columns that you can see here. So if we change this, you'll see it change in the page 2. I'll put it back to 15 pixels. And I'm not seeing a grid template row because this one's overridden. So when you see something overridden here and you're not sure exactly what overrides it, in Firefox you can click that little icon here and that's going to run a search for that property. So then you'll see exactly what overrides it because it's going to be highlighted here. grid template rows. So we see that there's another rule. It's above this one because it's more specific. So this one overrides this one, and it defines 17 rows. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. 17 rows here. If I were to disable this one, then of course this one would become enable again. It's not overridden anymore, so there'll only be 10 rows defined on that page. But here we have 17. Okay, let's clear that out. What else do we have? So we know that the page was transformed, it defines a grid, it is 100% of the view height, and then so let's look at the various elements on that page. I'll use that picker tool and move my mouse over, I don't know, let's look at this one for example. So this one is a paragraph of class intro. We can see that it's a direct child of the body, and in grid, the container is the grid here, and what we consider as being items of the grid are direct children elements. And so that means that the P, this paragraph element here, is a grid item, and it can therefore be positioned on the grid using different types of mechanism, but the most common one is, or at least I think the most common one is this, using the line numbers. So grid column and grid row properties here. If I expand this shorthand, you see that it actually combines two longhand properties, grid column start and end. So what that means is that I want this particular element to be positioned on the grid starting at column number 6 and ending at column number 8. So that's column, in fact, let me rephrase that, starting at column line number 6 and column line number 8. We count column lines. The lines are the lines between the columns. So that's line 1, line 2, line 3, 4, 5, 6, which is where our element starts, 7, 8. All right? And I can do a little bit of cleanup so things are easier to understand. If I remove the gap and if I go to, oh, okay, we already have the display line number. Oh, I see, the line numbers would be very useful, only they are outside of the viewport. So let me do maybe, we can have the transform again, but we can change that to remove the rotation, and would actually make the scaling smaller, and therefore we just scale down the whole page so that now we can see the whole grid, and we can therefore see the numbers. So I'll select again this intro paragraph here, and as we were saying, grid column start and end 6, 8, and you can see the line numbers are just written here, so it's very easy to just look at them and see that, yeah, that's exactly positioned where I want it to be. Grid row is 10, 15, same thing here, let me 10, 15. So positive numbers are along the left side and top, and you can see that there are negative numbers here, because in grid you can also refer to lines by using negative numbers, and that means they'll start from the opposite angle of the explicit grid. So that's what's happening here. You could therefore use grid row, let's see, you could use grid row -4, -10 here, and that would do the same thing, and something that's useful if you want to position an element relative to that corner here. All right, let's look at something else. I'm interested in these lines here. They're really looking very nice, but I don't understand where they come from, and I can't seem to be able to select them. They might be some sort of background maybe. So I'm selecting the body element again. Oh, see what happens here? You know, but before and after, if I move my mouse over these pseudo elements, then the highlighter tells me that those lines are actually generated by those elements here. So let me select that before element. Oh, and that's interesting. So another thing is the pseudo elements, they are considered as grid items too, because they are, you know, direct element, sorry, direct children of the body, which is the grid itself, so therefore they can be positioned on the grid. So this was used as well. You see, if I turn these off, they move back up to their original position, which is like, top left corner in that case. But this before element is set to be grid column 1 to 4 and grid rows 7 to 11. I'll just turn on the grid again so we can see better. And they're basically just having a border right and border bottom. That's it, Very simple, no markup needed because this is purely generated in CSS. This is purely decoration. It is very simply, put on the grid and then styled with CSS. That's pretty cool. All right, let's see the after. After is here. That's a more interesting one because it has like a repeating linear gradient. So otherwise, same thing here. The after is grid column 7 to -1. Okay, so that's interesting. 7 to -1 column means that it starts at column 7, which we can't see here because column 7 is here, but that's only because that paragraph is here. So let me select this paragraph and then I'll just hit the H key. H is a shortcut for when you have anything selected here, it's going to hide that. And now we can see that those lines, if I select them again, do start at column 7 and then they end at column -1. So, okay, -1 is the number of these lines starting from this edge. So that way, defining it like that means I don't need to remember how many lines, column lines I have, which is 11 here, but instead this is saying always start from the rightmost side of that grid here, which is very useful because maybe there are media queries that will change the size of this grid and have fewer or more columns. Grid row 9 to 15. All right, and then there's like a background. Oops, I'm sorry. The background is what makes these lines. So there's a repeating linear gradient. It goes from a position 0, which is black, to 50%, which is white. Black and then transparent to 100%. So it's basically alternating black and transparent with a background size set to 12 pixel on the vertical axis. That's how the browser knows that each of these couple of lines is 12 pixels. If I change this number, you'll see the line height change as well. Yeah, I think that's basically it for that page. I'll refresh it so that all of my changes are removed, so we go back to the original thing. So I hope you like it. That's it. Thank you for watching.